guys, welcome back to my channel. Yes, the baby has finally vacated the premises. Yay! Or nay, we can talk about the pros and cons of having a baby another time, but today we're going to focus on the pros and cons of owning Pat McGrath eyeshadows, but let's not get ahead of myself. Like I said, the baby was born a couple of weeks ago, on October 28th to be more precise, and that's why I disappeared off the grid. I'm hoping to finally be able to get back a little bit more on track with, playing with makeup and doing videos, because I'm basically with him all day long and babies are pretty dull, so if I get the chance to, do something else aside from feeding, changing diapers and soothing him, then I would gladly do that. He doesn't always allow for that. Some days he just, wants to scream for dear life from 8 a.m. until 10 p.m. and then there's nothing else you can do about it, and there's really nothing you can get done. But on other days he's, in a better mood. Maybe the position of the moon helps, I don't know. For whatever reason, some days he's calmer than others, and we're still, trying to figure out a routine, because the first few weeks there was always someone around here, and it's only since this week that the two of us are kind of at home trying to figure out a routine for the two of us, because my husband is at work and I'm home with the baby most of the time. So let's jump into the video because I'm really excited about it. The reason I wanted to film this video is I realized that in the past few months, like ever since September or so, I've kind of been focused on obtaining Pat McGrath products and I haven't really bought anything else. I've kind of had this like switch in my mind in terms of how I go about purchasing makeup, and now I'd rather invest in a Pat McGrath palette and only buy that for the whole month, rather than 5 other palettes from other brands which are, while nice, are nothing special compared to Pat McGrath palettes. I can't really tell you where this whole change in my mental state came about from. I think it's just I was at some point so oversaturated with buying palettes from like a variety of different brands, and while, like I said, they are all nice, they are all at the same like tier of like mid-range palettes, and the quality was fine. I was enjoying them, nothing wrong with any of these palettes, but I was just looking for a new experience in makeup, and I feel like Pat McGrath products really gave me that new experience in makeup. So I wanted to share with you today what I consider to be the pros and cons of owning Pat McGrath eyeshadow palettes. At this point I own a considerable amount of those, because like I said, since September I've basically only been investing my money makeup wise into Pat McGrath eyeshadow palettes and products. I've like bought a couple of lip products as well. Let's just start off with a couple of basic things. So at the moment Pat McGrath Labs offers 2 types of eyeshadow palettes, the so-called mothership palettes, the ones that come in that in this hefty, luxurious black packaging, but she also has, I think, right now 6 of those mini eyeshadow palettes, and I have 2 of the mothership palettes. I have the Bronze Seduction and I have the Sublime. And from the small palettes, as you just saw, I have all 3 from her Opulence collection mini eyeshadow palettes, which I purchased in the beginning of November, end of October or something, in my first postpartum week, because I was, let's say, not in the greatest mood that week and I really needed to pamper myself a little bit, so I ordered these palettes. So the difference between the mothership palettes and the small palettes obviously is, first of all, in the price. The mothership palettes, so the big ones, are $125, 115 euros if you're in the EU and you're buying in euros, and the small palettes are $55 and correspondingly 49 euros. I got the Opulence set for a grand total of 115 euros, so for me that cost as much as one of the mothership palettes because I bought it in a set. Aside from the difference in price, the other major difference between the mini palettes versus the mothership big palettes is that, first of all, of course, the packaging differs wildly, because these guys are like cardboard. It's good quality cardboard, but it's not the weighty, luxurious black packaging that you get on the mothership palettes. And another significant difference that I would like to point out already now is that the mothership palettes contain these so-called special topper shades. They're always here in the left corner of the palette, left or right depending on how you look at it. They're these super sparkly, glittery, duochrome type of shades that are not present in her smaller palettes. I think the only bigger palette that also doesn't have these types of topper shades is her limited edition Decadence palette. I'm not even sure that one is available at the moment. I don't think so. I think it was limited edition. It was sold out. I've heard rumors about it coming back. Don't quote me on it, but that one also doesn't contain the special topper shades, and neither do the small palettes. So they do contain matte shades and like her metallic shimmery formulas, but they do not contain the special topper shades. One of the reasons I wanted to make this video is first of all because I'm like super fascinated with Pat McGrath Labs products at the moment, and because I also know that a lot of you have this same question on your mind. Is the price of these palettes and eyeshadows really worth it? What makes them so special? And actually, I would also like to ask you for your input, because what you're going to hear now in terms of pros and cons is my personal opinion. Yours may differ wildly from mine, so I'm actually very curious to hear what you guys consider to be the pros and cons of Pat McGrath Labs eyeshadow palettes. Yeah, let's just get started. What are the pros of Pat McGrath Labs eyeshadow palettes? So the first pro for me is not only in terms of like the eyeshadow palettes, but the whole spiel with Pat McGrath Labs is the very unique concept and the artistry that has gone behind it. Not only is Pat McGrath herself an icon in the makeup world, but she has also, I feel like, made the effort to create a brand that is not like anything else. I've read interviews with her regarding the creation of Pat McGrath Labs, and she has specified that she wanted to do something different, something that nobody else is doing. And one of the reasons I think for that is because she wanted to have something to make her brand stand out, something that would kind of combine her like runway editorial type of makeup style with creating products for mass consumption. That being said, I would like to point out that in my opinion, I don't think Pat McGrath Labs is like oriented and targeted towards the average consumer. I don't think she's trying to reach everybody. She's not trying to reach your average Joe who enters Sephora and wants to buy some makeup. So if you were to ask me what the biggest pro of Pat McGrath Labs and her products and her brand is, this would be it. The uniqueness and the concept behind it, and the fact that it just stands out. Her products are truly unique to my collection, and as someone who has an extensive collection, I can tell you it's very difficult for something to be so unique and to stand out. But her products really do stand out to me, and I treasure and cherish them. And I feel like for anyone who enjoys collecting makeup, Pat McGrath products are going to be among the most unique items that you own. So artistry and uniqueness factor aside, another big selling point for Pat McGrath products and for their price tag is of course the ultra luxurious packaging. I didn't quite realize before I owned one of her Mothership palettes myself how much these weigh. I think if someone were to invade my house and my makeup was the only thing I had around me, I could smack someone on the head with this and I'd probably send them into a coma. This shit is so heavy. And you expect it to be heavy, and you expect it to be ultra luxurious when it costs $125, and it does. Because if I compare this, for instance, to Natasha Denona products, I feel like Natasha Denona products are absolutely, packaging-wise, not as luxurious, and there is not as much attention to detail as the one that has gone into these palettes. This is just decadence at its best. I've said this before. I feel like this packaging is not luxurious, it's decadent. Something else I truly enjoy about Pat McGrath Labs eyeshadow palettes is the her unique take on color stories and the way she combines finishes and textures. So for instance, let's just take the Bronze Seduction palette as an example, because I feel like that is a great example of a warm eyeshadow palette that is done in a unique way, and she has put her own spin on it. We've seen so many warm eyeshadow palettes in the last 2 years. I've lost count. I don't even know why people make those. Everybody and their grandmother has done one by now, and I still think this is a unique take on the warm toned eyeshadow trend, because while the colors are nothing too groundbreaking, there's a brown, there's a bronze, there's a metallic red. Although, I have to say, I applaud her for including this shade over here, the metallic red shade, because I've wished for so many other warm-toned eyeshadow palettes that they would have a shade like this. Look how stunning that is. And then again, she also throws in those special shades over here, and I don't know whether you can see, but they have such interesting shifts to them that when you pair them with the rest of the palette, they have such transformative powers, and they can give such different effects to each of the eyeshadows in the rest of the palette, that you end up not having just a warm toned eyeshadow palette, but you have something that you can create so many different color combinations with. You can combine the textures in so many different ways, and you're going to get so many different results while only having 10 eyeshadows. There are so many warm toned eyeshadow palettes on the market. For instance, any of those 35 whatever palettes from Morphe. Theoretically you're getting 35 eyeshadows, but in practice when you put them on your eye they look the same. The kind of looks you achieve are pretty much the same. There isn't as much variety, there isn't so much that you can do to play around with to create really different looks with the shades that you're given. Whereas here, you're only given 10 shades. If you think about it, that's really not that much. However, because of the combination of colors and the variety of textures and those topper shades, you're able to do so much with just these 10 eyeshadows, which is something that I really appreciate, and I think is one of the incentives behind the brand to push people to be creative, to, you know, break free and be more experimental when it comes to their makeup. And I personally really like that, because I've always been someone who really enjoys combining different colors, and I really enjoy how these eyeshadow palettes also allow you to experiment with different types of textures. Speaking about the quality of the eyeshadows themselves, they are absolutely outstanding quality. Her mattes are beautiful, they apply so nicely and they blend absolutely effortlessly. Her shimmers are beautiful, her metallics are beautiful, and like I said, those topper shades are something that I've never seen anywhere else. They are so complex, they're so beautiful, they're so transformative, and they are so unique. And one of the last things that I wanted to mention as a huge pro for Pat McGrath Labs is something that I've noticed actually kind of recently, prompted by a comment that I saw from someone on YouTube, that if you look at the ingredient list of her eyeshadows, especially the topper shades and the more special shades, contain ingredient that is, I don't think, very commonly used in eyeshadow palette, because I think it's more expensive to put that in your formula. And the name of that ingredient is synthetic fluoroflogopite. I am going to put the name of it somewhere around here so you can look it up for yourself, but basically this is synthetic plastic-free mica. So most eyeshadows contain natural mica. So aside from the fact that synthetic mica is much more environmental friendly, from what I understand, it is also, because it's created in a lab, it's much more pure, it's much smoother, and the colors are much more bold and reflective. So that is also perhaps one of the reasons why her topper shades and some of her metallic shades are so impactful, because they contain synthetic mica instead of natural mica in their formulation. I've rambled for half an hour now, so let's just jump into the cons real quick, because there are some cons with owning Pat McGrath Labs eyeshadow palettes. The first one, of course, being the price. The price is completely ridiculous and outrageous if you think about it, because while I think her small eyeshadow palettes are pretty reasonably priced, I think that for the quality that you're getting, and given the brand and the person behind the brand, $55 or 49 euros is not too bad. I do think her mothership palettes are incredibly expensive, and in my mind I feel like maybe something around the $100 mark would have been somewhat more appropriate price-wise in terms of the quality and the luxurious packaging. I think 125 is just taking it a notch too far, but you know, I don't know how much the packaging of these costs, I don't know how much the ingredients that go into the eyeshadows cost, so it's possible that just because I'm not properly informed, I'm not able to judge how much these shadow palettes really cost. In my opinion, they are really, really expensive. Another big con, in my opinion, in terms of Pat McGrath Labs, generally speaking, not just her eyeshadow palettes, is that they do not have any European retailers. And I realize that that is a con only for me because I live in Europe, but I know a couple of you also live in Europe and you struggle with the same thing. Yes, the website does ship internationally, the shipping cost is actually pretty reasonable, but that being said, because of the price of her products, I don't know about you guys, but I have to pay something in the range of 20 to 30 euros at least in terms of customs and import taxes every time I buy a product from Pat McGrath Labs. So given how expensive the products are already, can you imagine when you add the customs and the import taxes over top of that, it makes them even more expensive. So I would really appreciate it if they had a European retailer. While I do think her color stories are very interesting and very unique, I am going to say that in terms of like the colors of her mattes, her eyeshadow palettes are incredibly repetitive. Basically what you're going to get in terms of matte eyeshadow formula and colors is 95% to 98% browns and a black. That's it. If you go through all of her palettes, you will notice that the only color of matte that you're ever going to get is predominantly brown, and there is a black in most of her eyeshadow palettes. So I feel like it would be beneficial if she started including colorful mattes. For instance, the Sublime palette I think would have greatly benefited from like a dark forest green matte instead of the black. I think the Bronze Seduction palette, for instance, instead of having this additional second brown here, that could have been like a rich oxblood red matte eyeshadow, because why do we need two browns? I think one was enough. So there's definitely not a lot of variety, and there's a lot of repetition in terms of her matte shades. Now we're at a point where the makeup industry is so oversaturated with brands that are constantly producing new eyeshadow palettes, new eyeshadow formulas, that good or even excellent doesn't cut it anymore. You have to do something truly special and unique. And I do think her topper shades are unique, I stand by my opinion, but I think her mattes and her shimmers and metallic formulas you can find within other brands that are more affordable too. Maybe these are made with somewhat more higher quality ingredients, but in terms of how they apply, I think you can get similar results with cheaper eyeshadow palettes. So that is definitely something to keep in mind and take into consideration, that if you're expecting to be mind blown by all of her eyeshadows, you're setting yourself up for disappointment, because you're going to really enjoy the quality and you're going to be very, I think, personally wowed by her topper shades. But in terms of the rest of her formulas, if you're used to good quality eyeshadows, you're not going to be completely blown out of the water. When you're paying $125 for an eyeshadow palette for 10 eyeshadows, you really want all of the eyeshadows to be of excellent quality. You don't want any of them to fall short in any way, shape or form. And while I don't have like any major complaints with any of the eyeshadows in her small eyeshadow palettes, I can think of an eyeshadow in each of my Mothership palettes that I do think falls a little bit short in terms of quality. For instance, in my Sublime palette, this shade here, which is also very unfortunate because it's one of the topper shades, this pinkish duochrome shade, I think it's very dry. It just feels like sandpaper and I can't really get it to work. Like, it looks really pretty when I look at it in the pan, but when I apply it, I feel like it just, because of how dry it is, it just doesn't look very nice on the eyes. I don't really know how to explain it, and I think only people who own the eyeshadow palette can probably relate to this. Let me know if you've made this eyeshadow work in some sort of way, because for me that eyeshadow always looks better in the pan than it does on my eyes. And if I had to pick an eyeshadow from the Bronze Seduction palette that I'm not completely blown away by, I'm going to go with this Extreme Aubergine shade here, because I was hoping for this shadow to really have a lot more purple tones to it, and when I put it on my eye, I do feel like it leans a bit more dark, and you know, it looks a bit more like a black rather than a true purple rich aubergine. I would have really preferred this shadow to have more purple tones to it. Do I have another con? I do have to mention that a lot of these shades would work better if you apply them with your finger. For instance, in the Sublime palette, one of my favorite eyeshadows is the Blitzed Emerald shade. If I apply that shade with a brush, it just doesn't do anything for me. I really need to apply it over a glitter base and with my finger in order to get the best intensity out of it. So if you are someone who really truly dislikes using your fingers when you are applying your eyeshadow, you might be a little bothered by the fact that you have to use your fingers for a $125 eyeshadow palette. The last con I wanted to mention, and of course something that is quite logical and is not necessarily a con of the quality of the product itself, but just something that goes with it. One tends to be much more critical I would even say overly critical of a product that is so expensive. So you set your expectations really high, and when your expectations are not met, you become overly critical and you kind of nitpick on the smallest things you can find. So while I do think that these eyeshadow palettes are of excellent quality, you know, you can find little things here and there that you're like, this could have been better for $125. I do very much cherish my Pat McGrath Labs eyeshadow palettes, but I also wanted to give you a little bit of like the pros and the cons and just give you something to think about. Also get your input on what you would consider to be the pros and the cons of Pat McGrath Labs eyeshadow palettes. Let's just talk about it in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!